Can you hear me? All of you hear me? Can you hear me? Say we. I was born in Limerick in the south of Ireland. Now, south of Ireland, of course, was neutral, like Sweden, and we did not have to join up in the British Army. I was born in the year 1925, 10th of September 1925. My father was in the British Army before the war, and when the war started, just before the war started, he'd been in a long time and he was retired. And at that time, it was very dangerous in England. And he thought with his young family, it was me and my brother and sister, it would be best to go back to Ireland where it was neutral. So back we went. So it wasn't just my family, lots of families, plenty of families. And English people too came across me. Then because I happened to be in England for so long, I went to school in England. And having been there for so long, I didn't think it was right that I should stay out of the war. And my brother, being older than me, one morning we got up and he was gone. He'd crossed over the border into Northern Ireland. He was 18, I was 16. Then when I became just under 18, not quite 18, I sent off to the office for my birth certificate. When I got my birth certificate, I changed the actual birthday date on it. So I changed my date on my certificate to the 22nd of May, not 10th of September. And because they wanted people in the army at that time, they didn't look at these things very closely. So I was allowed to join up. I joined up in Northern Ireland, a place called Newtown Arms. It's a little street, a little village in Northern Ireland, just over the border. There I was given a number, because every soldier in the British Army, or airmen, have all got numbers. And the first thing we had to memorize was the number which we were given, because that was the only number allocated to that particular person in the British Army or the Air Force. Then you were given your equipment. And that consisted of a kit bag, which you put all your stuff. It consisted of 2 uniforms, 2 pairs of boots, 3 pairs of socks, 4 shirts, 2 underpants, and 3 vests, and a cap, which they had, and a helmet, and also a gas mask and a gas coat. A gas mask, a gas coat. Now you have to get all that into that one bag. Into another bag, which was attached to your shoulders by webbing. You had a big bag on your shoulders, called the pack, or the pack of the bag. Down at the side you had a water bottle, and at this side you had a small pack. In that small pack you had all your washing. There was a towel, shaving soap, your shaving gear, and that kind of thing. And your mess tin. The mess tin, 2 square little boxes, metal boxes, your food. Right, so that was your equipment. At that time, they had become more. And I was sent from Northern Ireland across the Irish Sea, across to Scotland. I stayed in Scotland about 3 days. I was sent down to a place called Hatgate, outside Warrington, and I was put into training. Training there consisted of marching backwards and forwards all day long, saluting to the right, saluting to the left, saluting to all officers everywhere. It was discipline, instilling discipline into me. I was stayed there for 6 years.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I enjoyed that. I was young and healthy and so and then 6 weeks, that took 6 weeks. After that, I was sent of all places back up to Scotland again. A place called Peterhead, just on the northeast coast of Scotland, fishing base. And when we arrived there, I thought I was a very clever chappie. I'd finished all my training and all the rest of it, of course. It only just begun. It was there we learned how to handle the rifle, the Sten gun, the Bren gun, and the grenade, the hand grenade. So it was a very, very hard time. That particular period. Go on. The machine guns and the rifles and the grenades. A big machine gun, the Bren gun, and the little machine gun, the Sten gun. Then you had the rifle, and you were very, very lucky if you got the Sten gun because it was the smallest and the lightest. Now then, having been trained properly, and that meant under live ammunition, live over your head, with a treatment on the ground. Oh yes, live ammunition. You had posts in the ground about this high, with barbed wire running along, and you had to go on your hands and knees and belly, right down here, for 50 yards, on your hands and knees, on your tummy, once the live ammunition went right over the top. Now, how did you know it was finished? How did you know you had to stand up? You didn't. You stayed down, and the sergeant came and tipped you on the shoulder. But that was the time of training. And I volunteered for overseas, thinking I would get away from Scotland, where it was very cold and very wet. And we thought, oh, this is no good. We couldn't get out to see the girls. Peterhead was the nearest place. It was perhaps 4 miles away. And we were mostly confined to camp. So we couldn't get out much, so we got very fed up with this. And I thought, oh well, we'll volunteer for overseas. Now, overseas at that time meant, of course, India and the Far East, Malaya, and Singapore, Hong Kong. That was the overseas then. Of course, I didn't realize, and we never knew that the second front was going to open up. I volunteered, and I thought, oh well, it'll be a long time before they call us forward. But it wasn't. Now, I was up in Scotland. There was a unit, a small unit, down in Oxfordshire, a place called Broadwell.
Because he was fed up being in Scotland and just training all the time, he decided to volunteer, to become a volunteer, to go overseas. Overseas means you cross the sea. So at the time it meant India, Malay, Singapore, Hong Kong. He didn't realize, because they didn't know, it was a secret, that the second front was opening, and that France also meant overseas. What he wanted to do was go away to India. And so he became part of a regiment, and they had a camp near Oxford. Oxford, it's the university's town. So when was the day? You said to me it was a week before D-Day or something like that? Yes. So he arrived in Oxford a week before D-Day. He didn't know there was going to be D-Day.
And then the unit which I joined up, it was a medical evacuation unit formed and had been trained for perhaps 1 year before I got there. Now, I didn't know anything about this. So I left Peterhead, came down on a train very, very slowly. 24 hours it took. You know why? During the war, raids and all that, it took 24 hours. I had nothing to eat. Came down, came into London, from London out to Oxford. Got there about in the middle of the night. There was no light, because we weren't allowed lights. I made my way to what we call the guard room. Now the guard room was always manned, somebody always in the guard room to let you know where to go. I got into the guard room and the chappie said, you come with me. Took me onto a tent, in which were 7 chaps in there, and I was made up to 8. There was 8 people in one tent all the time. And those 8 people remained with each other all the ways through the war, if they were lucky enough. Now I joined that and I didn't know what to do, because I didn't just arrive there. And in the middle of the night, that same night when I was really tired, a sergeant came along with a big stick and ran it right along the side of the tent on the canvas and shouting, come on, come on, come on, get up, get up, get up. I was too tired, I couldn't get up. So the other 7 went off and I was on my own. Next morning when I woke up, sergeant came in, he said, you're on a charge. You tell him? Good.
He was so tired when he arrived from Scotland after the 24-hour trip. He hadn't slept, he hadn't had anything to eat. So he went to sleep in one of the tents. There were tents for 8, you understood that. And at midnight or 2 hours later, it was part of the training. The sergeant came and woke everybody up. Everybody had to get out. And he didn't wake up. He couldn't wake up. So he was still sleeping in the tent, the others went out, and the following morning he was said that he was on charge. It was a kind of arrested. So on the very first day he arrived in Oxford, he was more or less, militarily arrested because he had not been able to do the same thing as the others. He was too tired.
I went and had my breakfast in the morning, and then I had to get all ready to go and see the commander, the chappie in charge. When I got up in front of him, he didn't give me a chance to say anything whatsoever. He said, 7 days. 7 days Janker, 7 days confined to camp, 7 days extra duties. So that was my introduction to that particular unit. So I thought, oh well, we'll get that done. But of course I never did get it done because D-Day on the 6th of June started. And they didn't want me confined to camp on the 6th of June because we were going over. So we were taken down to the runway, big runway, because Broadwell was a very, very big camp. Gliders, horses, and of course many aircraft, in and out all the time, in and out back.
So the camp he was on was like a huge airport, and you had aircrafts and gliders. The gliders are shown on the map. Ce sont des planeurs. So he had been punished. He had to do something. He had to do what we call extra duties, des corvées. It was his punishment for 7 days, but he never finished that because they didn't want people to stay. They needed everyone. So he was taken to the runways. Ce sont les pistes d'atterrissage, les pistes de décollage, the runways. They were taken down there.
And we went into the aircraft. Now the aircraft were Dakotas, 9 Dakotas on the actual runway, waiting to take off. All the boys, the personnel, were put in the first three aircraft. By the way, the unit was called 93 FSP, Frontline Staging Post. And we were there, I was supposed to have been trained on evacuation of the wounded from the Normandy beaches. And we were supposed to fly into Carpiquet. And when we got over the sea and then circled in to come into Carpiquet, of course the Germans were still in there.
So the unit he was with in Oxford was an American unit to rescue the people who were wounded. It was a British unit, sorry, but a medical unit. So they went by plane to help the soldiers who were wounded. And in Carpiquet, you have it on the map, it's the airport near Caen. So the planes were ready to go to Carpiquet, they took off, but in Carpiquet there were still German soldiers. You see, they went to Carpiquet to help the soldiers, but in Carpiquet it was not liberated yet when they arrived there.
So we circled back to come out in near Ormond. There's a place called, I just saw it here now, it's Bretteville. And we landed there. Now there was 9 aircraft. The first 3 aircraft was all the boys in there, all the soldiers, airmen in there. The second 3 aircraft was all personal equipment. And the third 3 aircraft were all the hospital units, the actual tents for the hospital and all the equipment required. So that was the 9 aircraft. We landed at Bretteville, and as we came down to land, we were told that we could not take only just our rifles or whatever we were armed with at the time. I had a Sten gun. And we were told that as soon as the aircraft landed, we had to get out quickly. So before it actually stopped, we were all on the ground, taking cover from all these snipers and all the people who were around there. And we didn't have much time to go and collect any wounded people because we could have been wounded ourselves. And we were all scared. Not just scared, we were in a bad way. And the only thing that kept us going was you didn't want to be seen by your comrades to be frightened. So we carried on as best we could. But after a while, when the paratroopers landed all around us, they cleared a good space. And we were able to put up not the tents for ourselves, but the tent for the hospital. They were the first thing to put up. And the first night we put it up and got it going and started going to get the wounded, it was bombed. And quite a few people were killed in the actual hospital on the tables where they were being operated. They were killed right out. So that was a bad thing. But we kept going, and I suppose, with the guns firing in from the shore where the big battleships were out there and the actual paratroopers on the ground, it was good really, because there was a lot of good comradeship there. And it didn't matter whether you were an army or an air force person, you all helped each other. The only thing is, of course, you had got nowhere to sleep. So you had to sleep by the side of a ditch out in the in a hole where there'd been a shell had exploded. You got in there, tried to sleep for the night if you could. Very, very often you couldn't sleep at all. Not for the first week or so because you were scared, really. And it kept going like that for 17 days until Caen was taken. Before they took Caen, they thought that the Germans were in there. And the day before we went in there to take it, it was bombed heavily. And all the poor people in Caen were all killed. Most of them were all killed in Caen. Yeah. They were mostly all killed, I'm afraid. And that caused a lot of bad feeling between the British soldiers and the French people at that time. But naturally enough, it wasn't very nice. But so were a lot of our people killed. And it was very nasty business just around there.
As he couldn't land in Carpiquet, they went to land in Bretteville. And then the first night they arrived, the hospital tents they had set up were bombed. So there were many victims, around him. And between Bretteville, which you can see on the map, and Caen, Bretteville or Bréville? Is it Bréville? Bréville. You see Bréville, it's Le Bizet. You Le Bizet and Bréville, north of Caen. Okay? So they landed in Bréville, but it took 17 days to get to Caen. 17 days of fighting and bombings. And when they arrived in Caen, there were bombings by the British forces. And it made many victims among the French. But the bombings were necessary if you wanted to evacuate the German troops. But there were bad feelings between the British and the French because of all the victims. I have an anecdote. I was hitching, you see, in Wales one year. And I was given a lift by a man. And I was living in Caen at the time. So I got into his car and he asked me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "From Caen." And he started laughing and he said, "Last time I saw Caen, I was throwing bombs on your city." And it made him laugh because for him it was in the distance. So many people had to do that.
After Caen, after this big blitz on Caen, there was nothing left that I could see there but 2 churches. You could see the steeples of the churches, and everything else was just more or less rubble. Nothing at all there. Rubble. You know what that is?
Yeah, we
And it was nothing there but dead bodies, and it wasn't just the men and the civilian people who were there. There was all the cattle, all the sheep, and everything like that. All that was all dead on the fields. And we had to go all among that and try and get the wounded out. Those who we could evacuate, those who were worth evacuating. Some of them, you see, had been so badly wounded, they were going to die anyway. They would die before we could get them back to England. So we had to leave them and carry on as best we could with those who had a chance to survive. And each man had 3 little packets of morphine to inject into the bad cases and to sort of stop the pain. And we were not medical order, we were not medical people, we were just shown how to do this to help them in that way. We would wrap bandages because we all had bandages with us and big things for wounds. We wrapped them up with these things and put them onto stretchers and took them back to where we had built an aerodrome because we didn't have Carpiquet. We had to build our own aerodrome. It was just one runway and it was built with steel wire, and you could get a piece about 6 feet long by 4 feet wide, and they were all interlocking. You could put them in together.
Parce que donc toutes les victimes, on les enterrait très vite, pas trop profondément pour pouvoir les récupérer. On se souvient, on les enterrait, on était fusils avec le helmet, le casque dessus. Et le problème, c'était qu'il avait donc tout un collier avec le nom d'identification. Et souvent, il y avait la tête d'un côté et de l'autre. Et il n'était pas sûr de remettre. Bon, enfin, vous imaginez ce que le spectacle qu'ils avaient à longueur de temps. Did you have to do somebody? Voilà, lui, il a fait ça, il a enterré, parce qu'ils étaient là pour voir qui était en poste. Donc, ils ont eu ça à faire des centaines et des centaines de fois. Donc, on récupérait, si vous voulez, c'est sur le numéro, on savait qui était mort, mais on ne peut pas garantir que dans le temps, que ce soit les personnes. Et on ne pouvait pas.
et ils les enterraient sur les champs de bataille. C'est pour ça que vous avez des cimetières dans des endroits qui ne sont pas du tout.
And the next day, we were flown, not to the truck, we were flown to the bush. When we got there, I'll tell you a good story. When we got there, because we were very dirty and had a wash, and people there were very, very nice to us. Took us into their houses. Gave us some to that in the bush food. We had more food than they had. Jugs. And when they took us into that house, and we used to take some food with us, give to them, and then we'd have a bath, we'd clean up, and then I'd sleep in their beds. They got up in their beds and let us get in. But I remember the baby we took us in, me and my friend, we'd been going all this time without any proper washing. And when it came for us to get time to go to bed, I said to my friend, how are we going to go to bed? Because we stink of our feet stuff, and our socks were stinking, our boots were smelling them a mile away. And we thought, what can we do? And very well just go upstairs with all this. So we managed to have a wash. And then we had to come back and sleep for a while with them, and eventually we had to go to bed. So we went to go upstairs, we took our boots and shoes off. And one of the girls, I had to say to her, they've kind of put their shoes on. She knew that. So I said, excuse me, we have the best we could hope about what happened. And I said, okay, we will. So up we went. And when we got up in the morning, our shoes had been cleaned, and our socks and everything washed. That was very nice. There I went there to Belgium. We flew to Belgium. Where is Bruges? Bruges in Belgium. And there we had some more fighting to do. Then we went to Antwerp, near Antwerp. There, a lot of fighting down there. No fighting. Then we went to a place called Nivelles, just outside Brussels. And when we got there, the trouble was, of course, that we were coming, our forces were coming up to the Rhine, the big river, the Rhine. And Hitler said, had to stand there, had to fight there. That was where the battle was going to be. And we had to get across to it. We had to get across, we had to get in there. And we thought, how can we do it, you see? And the plan was all said that the best thing to do was to go across in the ducks. The ducks were a little bit like a car and a boat, a mixture of the two. So you could go off the land into the water and go on the other side. But they also implied over 8,000 paratroopers to make a place where all the bridges would go. And we were well back. They were up the front as far as the real fighting. They were there. But we had to load all the paratroopers onto the aircraft to do the jumping. Because we were the experts, we were the Air Force people, knew where they had to go and how they had to sit. And they all had parachutes, of course, and you didn't jump out and pull a string like you do nowadays. You were all attached to a string inside the aircraft. So that when you jumped out, this string just had automatically pull, the release pull, and let you flow down, so you didn't have to worry about that. Because they were always with guns and rockets and things like that. They couldn't be pull strings, so you had to jump out like that. When they got over the other side, of course, the parachuters were involved in that fighting. But we were further back. We didn't have anything to do much with that, just to load them up. But I was on the runway, putting these people onto the aircraft, telling them where to go and how to hang each one up in a string in the road. When the sergeant came, he said, "We're sorry, John, you must go. You must go with them." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because there is no dispatcher for this particular aircraft." He said, "You have done this and training for it, and so you must so go." So I get up in the aircraft. When the people came along down the aisle of the aircraft down towards me, some of them, when they came to the door, they froze, frightened. They wouldn't move. So they blocked the doorway, and the other boys couldn't come up. So I had to kick them out, kick them up the bottom, and out they went.
Did you have to use a parachute as well on that day?
No. Voilà.
I had to stay on the aircraft to come back again to pick another load up. And we went on all day in this little aircraft which we had built. There was an aircraft coming in and going out every 3 minutes. And we stayed there for quite some time. And then the next battle was at Arnhem. And of course that was a total disaster. It was glorious for what they'd done, but it was a total disaster. And because I had been up on the aircraft before, I had to go again, which wasn't very fair because there was other people. I had to go again. So the same thing happened at Arnhem as it did when we were around the shuttle month there. 8,000 people, 8,000 paratroopers went into Arnhem. I think it's 1,800 came out alive. So then, of course, we were in Germany, got into Germany. We moved on. I moved up to Hanover, outside Hanover. And there was plenty of fighting on the way, plenty of German fighting and the rest of it. And from there, I went to a place called Fußbottel in Hamburg. And that's where I finished my time in the war. Finished in Hamburg. Oh, it would be in October. When we landed in Fußbottel in Hamburg, there was Germans was still, was not disarmed. When we got up into the control tower, the chief of the good, he was up in the control tower, calling up an aircraft to get him away. We captured him before he could go. I must say, I'm sorry, I know this is a bit disjointed, it isn't properly put together, but I didn't know I was going to be speaking to big Germans, big boys like you. I thought my daughter-in-law, Patricia, from the fast one with me, she told me that I would be what I thought. She meant that we were speaking to little girls and boys about 10 years old. So I didn't prepare. So what I've told you today is what comes from my head. And it's all true, whether you agree with it or not. To you, of course, it's only a story, but to me, it was something else. Then just after the war, we were taken to see the concentration camps. And 3 days after the war finished, I was in the Belsen. I was in a concentration camp. When you went into Belsen at that particular time, you had to be what they call deloused. And they had a big machine. And in that machine, they had powder and nozzle, a hose with a nozzle in it. And all over you, all this white over you, completely over you, covered you from head to foot. That's to stop you from getting disease and whatever. And we saw all the poor people who were in there hanging from the wires, couldn't stand up, hungry, emancipated. Terrible thing it was. And we, being British, we thought we would give them something to eat. But we wouldn't have that because they were so emancipated they couldn't have the thing into their tanks. They had to have medical supervision. So all the hospitals, field hospitals and people like that were all rushed in there to try and get these people back to normal. In Belsen alone, 30,000 people, civilians, but extremely 30,000. Oh, it's the Germans, of course. We took so many prisoners, we put them into jail. You couldn't put them into jail. We had too many. So we had to build places outside of the fields. And the German soldiers were all dressed in blue, kind of a bluish-greyish uniform. And the Air Force, it's the same. The people guarding these people were soldiers, not the other soldiers. And they used to pass out through the wire at night, and the soldiers thought that they were there and going to do all their duties. And eventually we had to, our uniform were taken from us, and we had to go into khaki, just like the soldiers themselves. Now, I said nothing about the French people themselves. Very, very good to us. And also, of course, the French people with the resistance. We couldn't have done it without them. We could not have done it at all without them because they sent back photographs of the villages, all where the pillbox were, where the Germans were entrenched. So, and every unit had pictures of all this land of Normandy right in front of them. So they knew exactly what they were going into. But a very good idea what they were going into. And that was a very great help to us. And of course, a lot of French people, a lot of French boys came across and joined up with us. Thousands, not just a few, but thousands came across. They had their own uniform. The only thing I didn't like about it, now I'm sorry I can say this, but when they came to take Paris, when the war was finished, we were held back 3 days to let the French army go in and take Paris, which was nice, I suppose. Really. Paris, the new capital city, was a nice thing to do. But in war, you can't stand for that city, so I'm afraid you must get on with the job. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed what I said to you. I know to you it's just a story, but to me it was something that really happened. So thank you for listening. You may as well ask me what I think about the last war, for instance, the war that we did. Was it all worth it? I mean, all these people that died, would we be a bit worse off under the Germans? Would people know better than we do? Well, not the fathers and mothers. They knew better than I do what it was like with the German occupation. That's that. Yes, we had our own cooks, our own people who prepare our own food for us. And we had our own barbers, people who would cut our hair. We had everything that we wanted. But it was difficult because sometimes you got separated. And you had to prepare your own food. You had company vessels. Certain amount of food pressed down into various sizes which you could take along with you. The only thing, the trouble was cooking it. Now we devised a great scheme. We thought, when you took the stuff out of its container, which was tin metal container, we thought, especially on Normandy beaches, we fill them up with sand, we fill these things up with sand, and then go to your lorry or car and cycle out some of the petrol. Put it into the sand in the container and set a light on it. And we just meal like that.
Suffered more than the Americans and Canadians.
Well, I suppose in personnel, people we suffered more. But the Americans used to have supplied most of the equipment. And there was a thing called lease at the time. We bought everything which we got from the war, from America. We bought it. Don't think we got it for nothing. We did not get it. We had to buy it. And we're still paying for it today. Even in this very day, millions of pounds have been paid to America for the Lend-Lease. We have never been adopted.
Et il m'expliquait que les gliders, well, explain about the gliders and then we'll stop. The gliders.
As I said, the boaters were the best aircraft. The Normandy beaches were the best aircraft ever made. And the gliders, big airplanes without engines, just gliders like normal gliders. Now the Air Force, the Royal Air Force, the English ones, pulled 2 gliders at the back of each Dakota. The Americans only 1. And in the American airplane, they had 15 people. And in our one, we took up to 240. That's in the 3 aircraft, the 2 that was being towed, and in the Dakota was in front. And all the gliders, of course, when they came down, they were never recovered. Most of them were never recovered. Some of you will probably want to know if I killed anybody during the war, because you've all been like that. You will never be told by any soldier whether or not he killed anybody. And most of the time they didn't know. Because you could fire a rifle, we could kill it at a mile and a half. It's about 2 kilometers. You can never know. All you can know is when you get up, having fired your guns and got up, you could find the dead when you got up there eventually, when they were all there. But you never knew who actually killed them, whether it was you or somebody else. So, I knew I wasn't going to be asked that, because Miriam Monroe told me, she told you not to ask me that, but that is the position. The only people who knew that killed people were the people who went in with the bayonets and the Stengun, the small Stengun, which you and I had. standard for close quarter fighting. The only people who tell you if they killed anybody were the ones who keep the bayonet. So I'm going to go and get a hoax.
Sa, most possible, we give up, huh?